Hi everyone, welcome back to the Red Path. My name's Jack, and this is the next in our series of Getting Started. My angle is the tactics, and today we're going to be looking at Jakhals. Let's get into the video. So, last week we went over Berserkers, and we split the video into four broad areas there. We're gonna follow a similar structure for this one, and Jakhals. We're going to look at deployment, movement, and then sort of a role / synergies rather than specific targets, because their targets are kind of it matters less. I think the role for the Jakhals is slightly different than Berserkers. So last week we starting with deployment. Last week we went over there were some fairly general tips in there with Berserkers around how you want to start them. So transports, reserves, or on foot. These generally will hold true for Jakhals. So if you haven't watched that video yet, you should probably go check that out, because that's, even if I do say so myself, got some handy tips in it. So it should be noted that no characters can join Jakhals. So that means the amount of buffs they can get is a little bit more limited than Berserkers. So things like the Lord on Juggernaut, who was giving reroll charges, can't get that. So that means I'd potentially steer away from Jakhals, putting Jakhals in strat reserve. They won't reliably make the charge. You can still buff them with anger on, but that's only an 8-inch charge, which is not great. So unless you have a specific plan in mind for them, which could be secondary objectives. It could be there are legitimate reasons for putting them in strat reserve. Secondary objectives, pressuring a flank, popping up somewhere annoying, that kind of thing. Against certain armies, it'll be quite useful. But I'd just be careful of when you use that. Deploying on the board also obviously comes with some risks for Jakhals. They're far less durable than Berserkers because they're touch 3 and have 6-up save. Although the shiny new 6-up Feel No Pain is really nice compared to past editions. The other thing to note, obviously, is that they are very cheap compared to Berserkers. For just 75 points, you get 10 bodies. They're only OC1, but still, OC1. And there's 10 of them for 75 points, which is pretty good. In terms of movement, again, you'll want to follow broadly the same rules as for Berserkers. They are far less forgiving of mistakes because they are quite a lot flimsier. And they're also obviously far less likely to be able to take the hit if they do get charged, rather than if you're the one charging with them. For both movement and deployment, therefore, I'd say you still want to really be measuring threat ranges and assessing sightlines. In particular, sightlines for Jakhals, because even incidental shooting will clear them away fairly easily. The kind of guns that would be good into them are like high volume, strength 4+ guns. So bolters are the minimum threshold of what will be good for clearing them. Just because you anything that's winning on 3s that will chew through 6-up saves, like, you're going to fail them, right? Because it's 6-up, it's not that good odds. So yeah, you want to just be careful, even more careful of what can see them or what will be able to see them after the opponent's movement phase. But that being said, I think the role of the Jackal is probably slightly different, because they are cheaper and they have their objective ravaged rule. They can be quite useful to throw forwards onto an objective to force your opponent to engage. So ideally, you want to bait out, basically as bait, you want to bait out a melee unit to pull them forwards and open them up for a counter charge. Helps you trade a bit, because, and I mean, if depending on the blessings, if you get the Fight on Death blessing, they might even take some of them with them, that kind of thing. So we'll get into the blessings in a sec. In fact, now we'll move quickly onto the roles and synergies section. They are a very cheap unit that has multiple uses because they are cheap, and you shouldn't mind losing them too much. I think you shouldn't mind losing them, but you should always have a plan in mind for them. Like, you shouldn't throw them away. There should always be a purpose to sacrificing them. Think of them as like pawns for chess, I think. So the fact that they're 10 models minimum means they can have a fairly decent footprint for screening. So Jakhals, generally in my lists, have been used for screening either backfields or screening in past edition smites, but pushing that deep strike screen out, so that because with people not being able to come within 9 inches of you for most armies, being able to push that out as far as you can with just one unit is great. so they're really strong for that. They also do have a surprising number of attacks, even if they are quite low quality attacks, especially on the charge. Going to 3 attacks each with sustained 1 means they can pump out quite a lot, considering they're only 7.5 points ish a model. So that's pretty good. It also means that in combination with some of the blessings buffs, you can have an actually pretty good combat unit for a very cheap price, which will often result in them punching well above their weight. In particular, the lethal hits blessing, pretty good, because they're low strength. They'll be wounding stuff on 5s and 6s a lot of the time, or the bulk of the attacks will at strength 3 will be wounding stuff on 5s and 6s. So having lethal hits that just bypasses the wound stage, because you roll a 6 to hit, and not only does it turn into another hit, but it can also just turn into a wound. Pretty strong. I would also say the Feel No Pain blessing is the other one that caught my eye. Obviously, they have a 6-up Feel No Pain base. Turning that to a 5-up is real good. And it just makes them quite a lot more annoying to shift. Which is, again, for a 75-point unit, pretty handy. I would also say, crucially, given their floor is 75 points as opposed to the floor of the Berserkers, which is 115 points, Jakhals also offer us a much cheaper access to the icon effect. So I mentioned it in the Berserk video, but it basically allows you to reroll one of your blessings dice for the low price of 75 points rather than 115. Which is only good. I think being able to manipulate your blessings roll is just really strong. Whether that's with icons or with stuff like the Lord of Skulls, but that's for another video. So we've done blessings buffs, we've done icon. Now let's get into the cheese. Although you only get 10 in the combat patrol, if you do enjoy using Jakhals and want to get more of them, in theory, you can field as many as 120 of them now, which is 6 squads of max, which is 6 squads of 20. And although no characters can join Jakhal squads, there are some buffs that are still auras for World Eaters. So obviously, Angron is very powerful as a multiplier for Jakhals, being able to give out full rerolls to hit, especially with sustained hits tied to the hit roll. Being able to fish for that is really useful, especially if you layer on things like lethal hits. Pretty strong. The +1 charge is also a nice alternative if you're looking to make some longer charges. Aside from that, you've got stuff like Invocatus. So if you really want, you can scout 6, 2 squads of 20 Jakhals, which would be a very nice screen, and also with Objective Ravage would potentially chuck you onto an objective in the midfield at the start of your command phase. So you would benefit from Objective Ravaged as well as the icon effect for your first blessings roll. Pretty strong combination there. Another one is 8-bound. Obviously, give out a reroll 1s to wound aura now, inexplicably, which turns into a full rerolls to wound against units that are below half strength. Pretty strong, especially considering their low strength, and so the wounding stage is probably where Jakhals will struggle more. So that's a very strong synergy as well. My favourite, though, which I've seen bandied about the Discord a bit, is assuming you get the 5-up Feel No Pain blessing off. You then also just chuck a World Eater Demon Prince without wings, so the one on foot. Chuck him in amongst these 120 hypothetical Jakhals that you would have to paint. So that you have 120 toughness 3 bodies that only have a 6-up armor save, but have a 5-up Feel No Pain, and before that they also have a 4-up invulnerable save. Because the Demon Prince on foot, he gives out an aura of 4-up invuln for infantry, which is very, very funny. So suddenly your 7.5 point models are quite tough to shift. Another funny thing about that is that 120 Jakhals is not that many points. So with them and a Demon Prince, you can still get other stuff in on top of that. So that list has the potential to turn very silly very fast, and be entertaining for you to play, probably. just make. I would advise it's probably not a list for someone playing their first couple of games, because it is a lot of models to move around, especially if you're playing in a tournament and have time constraints. It can take a long time to physically move 120 models without the aid of things like movement traits. But yeah, so Jakhals, I think fulfill you want to send them into roughly the same targets as Berserkers. They're obviously worse, but they're also way cheaper. So as I say, 75 points for 10, and they fill a lot of different roles that you wouldn't want to use Berserkers on. So some of the early game trading, like bait, you wouldn't really want to use 5 Berserkers as bait to prompt counter charge or bait out a charge that you can then counter charge. So Jakhals is quite useful for that. As I say, so yeah, hopefully there's been some useful information in that short video. Obviously, a lot of the tips we went over last week are quite general, and a lot of them do still apply here. You just have to take into account that Jakhals have lower toughness, a worse save, worse leadership as well is one to note, and only OC1 instead of OC2, but you generally have twice as many of them as you have Berserkers, just because of that. That's the way the squad sizes work. And there are a few less. There's a bit less in terms of character support for them, but you can still do some funny stuff with them. Yeah. Hope you found this useful. Let me know in the comments below if you have. If you haven't, obviously we've got another unit next week, or another couple of units to come for our Getting Started series. Yeah. Join the Discord as well. If you really like running Jakhals, tell me how many you're planning to run. If anyone genuinely runs that 120 Jakhal list at a tournament, please let me know and send pictures, because I really want to see that on the table. I personally do not want to paint 120 Jakhals, so I will not be running that. Yeah, join Discord, links down below. But most importantly, guys, stay healthy, stay safe, and kill me.